and she went another 15 miles on fumes.
She told me herself, so we're gonna go on a date. She and me, her and I, me and her.
Well, Dad, we were kind of hoping to save that till after dinner.
No, I want to hear about it now.
Maxine said if they needed help, they would give me a call.
No, you're leaving. You want to know why? Because I gotcha.
I'm amazed at how that boy could stand in my kitchen in front of my face and lie to me like that.
I'm going to stand up to Mrs. Huxtable.
Well, I don't think you want to do that.
Your wife won't let you do anything.
Hi, my name is Miriam Temeskin, and this is the Black TV Show podcast, currently talking about The Cosby Show Season 3. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 58 of The Cosby Show Season 3, episode 10, A Girl and Her Dog. This episode aired on December 4th, 1986. So the synopsis of this episode: Cliff's left alone with the kids for a day before they go on a trip to Washington. A dog follows Rudy home and she has trouble letting go with the dog's owner comes to get it. So we start off with Rudy coming in with Peter holding onto a dog, and she's checking around if people are around, basically checking for Cliff. And, Peter brings in the dog that they found, and they decide to feed it, and they're going to feed it bologna. So they're in the kitchen and feeding the dog bologna, and Cliff is in his bedroom, making his bed. And the phone rings, and it's Claire who's in Washington. Of course, this was another way to cover Felicia's belly, because at this point she's probably like super pregnant. Of course, when they shoot these shows, this episode aired December 4th, but I feel like this episode probably was like filmed at the beginning of November, so she's not like ready to burst out, in terms of her pregnancy, like into labor, but like she's like 8 months pregnant, right? So they have to really hide her. So they put her in a different set to cover that belly. And Cliff and Claire pretend to be somebody else. And then eventually they actually start talking about, real stuff. And she asks, like, are the children fine? And Cliff was like, yeah, they're fine. They're going to be going to Washington to root for her this weekend at a conference. We don't know what exactly is she doing, because she's a lawyer. And she's at a conference. So what are they rooting for? They never mentioned that in this episode. And I watched this episode twice. And I don't have a clue what is going on in Washington. So someone tell me, because I don't know. So Claire asks if everything at home is going great. And Cliff says yes. Claire asks, is Theo wearing a heavy coat when he goes out? Cliff says yes. Claire asks if Rudy is not wearing the same underwear the same day. Or like she's wearing the underwear every day for the same day kind of thing, not changing her underwear. And Cliff was like, no. it was a very random question. And then Claire asked if Vanessa's trying to get away with wearing makeup, because you remember that episode, Mother May I, in episode 5, she was trying to wear makeup, and Cliff first said yes by accident. He's like, no, she's not wearing makeup. And we're back in the kitchen, and the dog is finished eating the bologna, and they were like, oh, we need to brush the dog. And so Rudy decides to get a spoon that they use for spaghetti. I feel like you can use it for any kind of food, but like the fact that it's for food and they're gonna use that to brush the dog, if I saw that, I would throw that away. I would never use that again. I'm like, you don't know what's in that dog. I'm sorry, guys. You're probably gonna hate me on this, but I don't like dogs. I don't like a lot of animals. I'm actually scared of dogs. Even though there's a photo of me when I was a kid where I was literally sitting beside a dog, petting a dog, which is very strange. But now I'm actually like, actually have a major fear of dogs. So if I saw that, I would throw that out. I will never use that again. And so we're back into Cliff's room, and he's making his bed, like taking the sheets out of the pillow, I guess, because he's going to wash them. And Vanessa comes in and says she doesn't think she's going to Washington this weekend, because her friend is having a party, and it's going to be the party of the year, basically. And she needs to be there. And so she tells Cliff, thank you for understanding. And Cliff was like, no, come back. You are going to Washington. And Vanessa was like, she won't be cool if she doesn't go to this party. And Cliff was like, they might think you're so cool you decide to not show up to the party. I love that, too, the way he says that. And so we cut to the kitchen, and Theo comes in and notices the dog. And, Theo's like, you're not allowed to have dogs. And Rudy says, it was at Peter's house, and it came out and followed us. And he tells Rudy, you're not allowed to play with stray dogs. And Rudy says, the dog seemed real friendly. And Rudy told the dog that it can live with her. And he was like, you better enjoy it now until Dad sees it, and the dog will be gone. And, they have that rule of they're not allowed to have dogs in the house. And Peter calls out Rudy to show the dog has pooped. And they're like, ew, gross. And so Cliff, calls for Theo, and they're like, hide. We gotta hide the dog, hide the poop. And so, like, the kids take the dog to the basement. Theo goes and cleans up this dirty poop, nasty, It was just gross. So then, and Cliff is asking, like, where's Theo? Like, Theo's like, I'm in the kitchen. And so the kids take the dog away, the poop is gone, and they're all in the kitchen trying to act cool. And Cliff was like, hey, and like he has like the dirty laundry from the bed, and comes in, he's like, do you smell that? That's like, it's gross, basically. And he goes and checks everyone's feet, just in case if they stepped into poop, probably. And they all said, no, we don't smell that. And so Cliff decides to check the garbage, and he sees there is the mess. And then all of a sudden the dog barks, and Cliff checks the basin, and a dog follows him. And he's like, this dog is not allowed to be here. And Rudy was like, can we keep it? Can we keep it? And Cliff was like, no, this is someone's dog. They're probably looking for it. And Theo tells Cliff, the whole story of what happened with the dog. And Theo says, he checked the dog and it looks healthy. And Cliff was like, oh, so you gave the dog a full exam? And Theo's like, not exactly. And so Rudy, begs to keep the dog. And Cliff says the dog belongs to someone else and it's missing. And Rudy keeps begging, and Cliff says, let's have a meeting in the living room. And he leaves the dog with Theo to take care of and also clean up the smell, putting in ammonia to get rid of that smell. And so he goes talks to the kids. And first of all, I don't know if I just noticed it in this episode, but the doorway that connects the kitchen to the living room, there are handprints. I don't know if they're actual handprints or it's like you put your hand on a piece of paper and like you cut it up, and then they taped it to the door. It seemed very random to see that, because you don't see that throughout the series. So I don't know. That was just very random to me why I was there. So Cliff says, we have to return the dog. And Rudy was like, no, I love it. And Cliff uses the example, what happens if you were lost? Wouldn't you want the person to bring you back home? And Rudy was like, I guess. And Cliff says he knows a place that helps dogs find their owners. And it was basically a non-profit organization. And Rudy calls it dog jail. And Cliff was like, it's not a dog jail. It's like a nice place. And Rudy says, let's keep the dog until the owners find it. Or I guess until they go to Washington. And Cliff says, this is not a nice place for a dog. It's not a nice home. There's nobody to watch it. They're all, either in school or working. And even like Rudy decides, like, I can drop out of school. Like, I can just stay home. Not a good idea. And Rudy asks, who's going to feed so Cliff asks, like, who's going to feed it, clean it up after, wash the dog? And Rudy says, she will, and Peter will help. And they make an oath that they will take care of the dog. So they will be taking care of this dog until either they go to Washington or the owners, they find the owners for the dog. And both Rudy and Peter give Cliff a huge kiss, or I guess Zerbert, and we end Act 1 right there, and we go into Act 2. And Vanessa's reading her book and in her robe, and it's 3:30 in the afternoon. She's acting very depressed. because she ain't going to that party, she has to go to Washington. And she tells Cliff that, when the kids found out that she's not going to that party, they treated her like an outcast. And Vanessa asks Cliff, will you reconsider? Like, I can watch the dog. And Cliff was like, the dog will not be here by the weekend. And Vanessa says, the house will be empty. Aren't you scared something will happen? And Cliff was like, and I would want you to be here? No, that's not going to happen. So Cliff goes into the kitchen and he sees the empty kennels. And he's like, you guys are not taking care of this dog. And so he has to refill one of the kennels with water. And Theo comes home with a bunch of groceries, and he has a newspaper where they have the clipping of the dog is lost, and we need the owner to find the dog, basically. And Theo brought some toys for the dog, even though the dog is only going to be there for a few days. Because Theo also has a soft spot for dogs. He wants to keep the dog, too. And Cliff points out, the dog is not even being taken care of at this point. And Theo says, you gave Rudy too much responsibility. We knew that she's not gonna take care of the dog, but if he took care of the dog, can they keep the dog? And Cliff was like, no. Because Cliff starts talking about when he was a kid, when Theo was a kid, he wanted a seahorse. Never heard what a seahorse is. I should look that up. What is a seahorse? So a seahorse is a 46 species of small marine fish in the genus Hippocampus. Hippocampus comes from the ancient Greek hippocamposo. It's itself from the hippos meaning horse and campos meaning sea monster. That is what Google says right now. Yeah, it looks very weird. It's like it's in water, and it's either like greenish orangish, and the tail curls up at the end. It looks very spiky. Yeah, didn't know what a seahorse was. So why did he have a seahorse? That's so strange. As a child, so he had a seahorse. He didn't treat the seahorse well. Cliff says when Theo gets his own house, he can get his own dog. That's fine, because that's his responsibility right there, right? And so Cliff goes in the living room, and Rudy and Peter are leaving to go play. Cliff gives them a reminder, you forgot your responsibility. You're supposed to feed the dog and walk the dog again. And so they're like, okay, so they go back in the kitchen to do that. And Vanessa comes down and is walking around depressed. And so we're in the kitchen and they're feeding the dog, but the dog poops again, and Peter decides to run and leave the house like usual. He does his running. That's all he does. Peter runs. And because he does not want to clean that poop. And Theo comes down the stairs, and oh, by the way, when he was running, Cliff was in the living room, so he saw what was going on. He's like, oh, it's the usual. Peter running out of the house. And so Theo comes down, and he tells Cliff, Vanessa's acting very strange. We need to do something about Vanessa. And Cliff is like, oh, it's okay. It'll be taken care of. And then Theo was like, we cannot take Vanessa to Washington, because Washington is the capital of the country. We all know that. And the people from all nations will be there. And when they see Vanessa, they're going to be disappointed about what an American girl is, And so the phone rings, and it's the owners of the dog. But Theo, keeps telling them, that's not your dog. And Cliff takes the phone, and he talks to the owners, and they tell Cliff to say squeakers. And so he's like, squeakers! And the dog runs to Cliff, and we realize the person on the phone is the owner of the dog. So later on in the evening, Rudy is very sad that the dog is leaving, and she decides to go to the kitchen, and Vanessa comes down the stairs and dropping all her papers, and she knows that she's doing that on purpose. And Cliff at this point is like, he's not happy. He's like, she's not happy with how she's acting, and he let her be sad for the last couple days. But now she's depressing him. And she is going to Washington, D.C., and she's going to be an example of an American teenager. And Vanessa's like, I'm sorry. And she decides to clean up the papers. And the doorbell rings, and it's the owners of the dog. And they brought a whole, like, basket of apples. Like, these are the nicest owners ever. Like, who does that? But I guess, like, sometimes, like, if you guys remember, like, I don't know how many months ago this was, when Lady Gaga lost her, or her dogs were stolen, she gave the person that found the dog $500,000. So I guess people really do. You know, that's the one thing I don't like, is that a lot of human beings treat dogs better than human beings. That I don't like. You know, like, I always have to bring this up, like, in terms of Black people. A lot of Black people are treated less as compared to an actual dog or a cat. It's pretty sad. So I don't like animals in general. So even though as human beings, we are animals too, but it's just, I'm talking about animals that are not human, okay? And so Rudy brings the dog, and the daughter of the family is so happy to see Squeakers. And so Cliff was like, oh, you're from Bedford, New York? That's like 50 miles away. And so I wanted to actually check if that was true. And so I looked, Bedford, New York, according to Google Maps, it is 47.7 miles from New York City. Of course, they're in Brooklyn, so I didn't actually check in terms of Brooklyn. But that's a long journey, basically. Like, it seems like this is like closer to the top of the New York State. I'm not sure. I don't know the state of New York. I only know New York City, but yeah. And the owners think that the dog went on one of the trucks that usually come down to New York City, and the mother says to Rudy, you know, you can come over and play with the dog sometime. And she's like, oh, okay, and she gives her last goodbye to the dog, and the owners leave and take the dog with them. And Cliff checks on Rudy, and Rudy is sad that, you know, she really misses the dog. And Cliff was like, you have a daddy dog. And Cliff pretends to be a dog. And we end that scene right there. And it's nighttime, and Cliff is, you know, about to go to bed. But he does his prayers first. And he says, you know, he doesn't think he's going to make it. He wants his wife back. And Cliff says there's people that ask for bigger things, but he needs his wife back. And the door knocks. And we all think it's Claire Huxtable. His prayers worked so quickly. And Lord worked his magic. But no, it's Rudy. And Rudy says she misses the dog. But Rudy states to Cliff that she doesn't want to have a dog. There's too much work. So she realized it's hard to have a dog, how to take care of a dog. And Rudy asks Cliff, you know, can I sleep on mommy's side of the bed? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And so Vanessa comes and knocks, and Rudy tells her to come in without even letting Cliff decide that, because it's Cliff's room. And Vanessa says, I'm sorry for acting the way I was acting. I am happy to go to Washington, D.C. And Vanessa asks if she can get in bed, and they're like, yeah, of course. And Theo comes and asks, what's going on? And they're like, we're going to keep Daddy company. And Rudy asks Theo to come into bed, and Theo was like, I'm a little bit too old for that. And Rudy says, you can watch TV. And Theo's like, okay, let's watch wrestling. It's on. And so they're all watching, and Cliff decides to go outside the hallway and talk to the Lord again. And he says he thinks he understands. He doesn't have his wife back, but he doesn't have a dog. And Cliff goes back in the bedroom, and the episode ends right there. So we really solved the issue with Rudy really realized that there's too much work to taking care of a dog, and that shows maturity, I feel like. And Vanessa stops acting like a stick-up rich girl, I guess, in a way, and says, you know, I'm gonna go to Washington DC to support my mother. So the episode ends right there, and the title of this episode is actually based on the apocalyptic science fiction movie A Boy and Its Dog. Never heard of this because it came out in March 15th, 1975. So A Boy and His Dog, Vic is a 18-year-old transversing the post-apocalyptic desert of 2024. Isn't it crazy? 2024. That's 3 years from now. Just weird to like think that this movie is like about what's happening now. So clearly we should watch this movie. So it's in the company of this telepathic dog, Blood, when the pair encounters an underground community that leader's daughter, I don't know how to say this name, Colola Holmes? I'm not sure. I'm saying that wrong, so I apologize. Seduces Vic into their fold and separate him from Blood, who's left to survive on his own. By once Vic discovers he's been lured there solely for mechanizing procreation, he realizes he's doomed unless he can escape and rejoin Blood. If you want to check that out, it's called A Boy and His Dog. Not sure where you would find it, because I don't think it's on Amazon. But yeah, that seems like a movie that like people should start watching now to see like, oh, what did they think about 2024? It's weird to think about that. And honestly, the title of that for that movie compared to the title of this episode do not match. But I like the resemblance of them using that from a movie. And I want to let you know that Sabrina LaBeouf and Lisa Bonet do not appear in this episode, even though they are credited in this episode. Guest stars for this episode was Peter Costa as Peter, and Mario Mendeza as Tony. That's the father of that family. He was in Law and Order, and he's only in 8 credits. And then there was Rosalinda Petron. I don't know if I'm saying her last name wrong. I'm sorry. She only has 4 credits. And Diana Lorenza. Ooh, I'm really saying these names wrong, so I apologize. I love the Latinx community, so I apologize for butchering all these names. She only has 4 credits to her name. So the lesson for this episode is owning a dog is a lot of work. The question I have for you guys was, what animals did you have growing up, and was it hard taking care of it? Let me know at Black TV Show Pod on Twitter and Instagram using the hashtag HerDog. I never had animals. As I said, I do not like animals, and I will probably never own an animal, so I don't need to really answer this question basically because I never experienced owning a dog. But I want to hear your stories. Let me know at Twitter and Instagram at Black TV Shows Pod. And the next episode is episode 59, The Cosby Show Season 3, episode 11, War Stories. And I will see you all on the next one.